Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Let's start the program with the recitation of the Holy Quran. For this, I request Ayan Iqbal Sahib.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وإذا قرئ القرآن فاستمعوا له وأنصتوا لعلكم ترحمون واذكر ربك في نفسك تضرعا وخيفة ودون الجهر من القول بالغدو والآصال ولا تكن من الغافلين إن الذين عند ربك لا يستكبرون عن عبادته وَيُسَبِّحُونَهُ وَلَهُ يَسْجُدُونَ. English translation. And when the Quran is recited, give ear to it and keep silence, that you may be shown mercy. And remember thy Lord in thy mind with humility and fear, and without loudness of speech, in the mornings and evenings, and be not of the neglectful. Truly, those who are near to thy Lord turn not away with pride from his worship, but they glorify him and prostrate themselves before him. Chapter 7, verses 205 to 207. Jazakallah.
Jazakumullah ahsanal jaza. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Today, New York Jamaat Secretary Publication, Shuaib Abul Kalam Sahib, organized New York Jamaat History Program under the supervision of Secretary Publication, USA Jamaat, respected Sayyid Sajid Ahmad Sahib. We are thankful to them that they have provided us this opportunity to watch and listen New York Jamaat history. The importance of history is well known because history doesn't stay behind us. History helps us understand how events in the past made things the way they are today. With the lessons from the past, we not only learn about ourselves and how we came to be, but also develop the ability to avoid mistakes and create better paths for our communities, for our societies. So after these few words, let me invite Haris Hamid Sahib for his presentation. Haris Hamid Sahib.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. So today we'll go over some New York history. New York City is the most populous city in the United States. It consists of 5 boroughs and is the largest metropolitan area in the country. It has more than twice the population of Los Angeles, the second largest city in the US. The city is renowned for its linguistic diversity, with over 800 languages spoken, making it the most linguistically diverse city on the planet. In 2021, it also boasted the largest foreign-born population of any city worldwide. The modern form of the city emerged in 1898 when the 5 boroughs, Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, and Staten Island, were consolidated. Jazakallah.
Jazakumullah ahsan al-jaza. The next program is Early Jamaat History in New York presentation. For this, I request Muzammil Jamil Sahib, please.
Assalamu alaikum. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. For a community to progress, it must know its own history and its heritage. Looking back at our Jamaat history here in the United States and in New York is at once inspiring and sobering, because you can see the bright future that is open before us if we sincerely take on the challenge of moving forward our mission as a united community. This is a heavy burden laid upon us, but as Allah Ta'ala has told us, He does not burden any soul beyond its capacity. So we should look to and learn from the pious and the Muslims of the past, through whom the path to the future has been laid open for us. We should reflect on them and their works as the pioneer members of the Jamaat so that we can forge ahead. Where New York is concerned, this is where many members of our community made their start and where some notable members of the Jamaat left a lasting mark. Many events and personalities will be mentioned tonight, and I wanted to start with the mention of 3 individuals from the earliest period of our Jamaat here in the US, namely F.L. Anderson, Alexander Webb, and Mufti Muhammad Sadiq. These and the Muslims were present at the time of the promised Messiah. With regards to the first, F.L. Anderson, he was the first American Ahmadi Muslim, and he accepted Islam Ahmadiyyat only through correspondence, letter correspondence with the promised Messiah. And the promised Messiah wrote about him that at that time, which was around 1902. And he wrote that in recent times, a respected American, a resident of New York City, who is in the United States of America, whose given name is F.L. Anderson, has accepted Islam, after which his name was given as Hassan. Then there's also Muhammad Alexander Russell Webb, and he was an American who traveled in India, and at that time he had heard of the promised Messiah, but was dissuaded from meeting with him by other Muslims. When he returned to America, he continued correspondence with the promised Messiah and eventually affirmed his belief in Hazrat Masih Maud. Next, there's Mufti Muhammad Sadiq Saab, who was a companion of the promised Messiah and a renowned missionary of the Jamaat. Traveling to the United States and arriving in New York in 1920, his missionary work here ushered in the most impactful era of Islam Ahmadiyyat that we have seen in the US to date, where the Jamaat became well established in different cities, and as many African Americans accepted Islam Ahmadiyyat in that time. During this time, there was a largely African American identity of the Jamaat, and these are the members through whom Allah carried the Jamaat forward for decades. Thinking about Mufti Muhammad Sadiq Saab, it is striking how a man who was a foreigner to this country at a time where there were practically no Muslims around, that he could step forward with such confidence and be so effective in spreading the message of Islam Ahmadiyyat and converting scores of people in such a short period of time. In contrast, those of us born and raised in this culture are unable to influence our own American community in this way. I believe it was the spirit, the conviction, and the knowledge that he brought with him, and above all, his trust in Allah Ta'ala that made him so effective. This brings to mind one occasion where an elder of the Jamaat once noted that as the elders pass on and are called back to their Lord, those that remain behind and the next generation must take stock of themselves and consider whether they are equipped with the virtues and characteristics that those of the previous generations possessed. And if they find themselves lacking in this regard, then they must make a firm resolve to acquire those traits, which are ultimately rooted in taqwa. So as we go through our history and honor our past and our elders, if we be determined to carry on their work in the same spirit as they did, then this would be the way to truly honor them. I wanted to make mention of one more person, which was a prominent member of the New York Jamaat, and he had a great impact on me and on my entire family. And that was Brother Muhammad Sadiq Saab. He was an African American convert to Islam Ahmadiyyat, and he joined the community maybe in the 1940s. And he was a jazz musician, and the jazz music at that time was the popular music of the day. And he was very well known. He played with all the big singers and musicians of that time. And after joining Islam Ahmadiyyat, he turned his back to all of that. He had the world in his hand, and he gave it all up just for his faith. And he maintained that throughout his life. And the people that knew him well, they all talked that he was truly a saint. He was a waliullah. And there's a lot of righteous people, but there's not that many people like that who truly have a deeper relationship or connection with God. And we're told that we should keep the company of the righteous. And when you have somebody like that, their presence alone is a guidance for you. And just that presence keeps you on the right track for the long term, even if you fall off the track here and there. So I just wanted to make mention of him. And so we're with regards to all these righteous, pious members of the Jamaat that have passed on, may Allah Ta'ala have mercy on them all. Ameen. Jazakumullah.
Jazakumullah Hasanan Jazak. Next, growing up in New York, Rizwan Aladdin Sahib, who is a Southern Long Island Jamaat, I request him, please.
Assalamu alaikum. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. I want to thank the National Department and the team for allowing me this time to talk about my own experience. My dear brothers and sisters, I'm honored to be able to talk about in New York. Hopefully my audio is there. All right. So yeah, so alhamdulillah, I was born and raised in New York, on Long Island, which is just next to New York City, and New York City is as a backdrop when I think about my own time in New York and my time growing up in the Jamaat here in New York, I can't help but think about this rich history that we have. In 1903. Don Alexander Dowie, an opponent of Hazrat Prophet Salam, it was where he famously went and gave that speech that he thought would be able to allow him to conquer the world, and Allah Ta'ala showed his true master and showed who's truly behind, and in the support of Hazrat the Prophet Messiah Salam. And we see here that after that famous speech that he gave him at Madison Square Garden here in the city that we saw his downfall. For me, that backdrop shows that there's a tremendous history, and I thank my brothers for sharing the history as well. Um, so my start begins with back in the Union Street Masjid, which was in Brooklyn, where that was my first masjid that I attended. And and please, you're going back a number of decades, so I'm sure I'm forgetting quite a bit about the exact details. But I was so honored that I got the chance to go and uh, to have that memory in my mind. As a shy boy coming to the masjid, if my father left me for more than a few feet, I would be in quite fear of where am I and where did he go. And there was one time this happened, and I was looking around where my father had walked off to, and I remember maybe I was 5 or 6 years old, and an elder of our Jamaat called out to me and said, "Hey, you there? Why don't you come over here? Come talk to me." And with that sense of obedience, I complied and I came to him even though I didn't know who he was. And he said to me, "Are you Sister Quillet's son?" And I said, "Yeah." And I was surprised how he knew my mother's name. And he goes, I knew your mother when she was your age. And then he told me how he knew my mother when he was young. And by that time, in that moment, we created a connection that I'll never forget and a friendship. And that was, as Brother Muzammil had shared before, Muhammad Sadiq Saab. And he was one person I could look forward to, especially when going to the masjid, someone who would recognize me and strike up that conversation. I know in the future we're going to be sharing some of the other highlights of others who had served here in the New York area. There's Colonel Hamid Saab, Major Hamid Saab, who was a Mubalig as well. And you can connect as you did, as Muhammad Sadiq Saab did, just by striking up a conversation and sharing a common past. Major Saab, it was his Shami kebabs. If you know the meat kebab that was a Pakistani style made, they were delicious. My first time having a Shami kebab that tasted so good, and I still remember it from this day. I don't know how he learned to do it, but he made that for us. And then Uncle Jalal Latif Saab, I don't know if you're there listening. I still remember you there from those times, serving the food downstairs. So the upstairs would be the ground floor where we would have the men's area. There was a small upstairs where the ladies would be, and then you'd walk downstairs in the basement area to get your food as you walk on out. And that was our masjid from the late 70s to early 80s, very early 80s. We would come there once every few months because the activity was of that level. When you talk about growing up in the Jamaat in those days, because how we were spread out, we often would then go and have halkas, and that's where we'd meet. And I remember at that time there was, I don't know if it was called the Long Island Halka, but it happened to be those of us in Long Island. We would meet together at one of my family's home. My grandfather was there, my own family. I had my grand aunt Zakia Mahmood Saiba and her family, and there were other families. There was Air Marshal Zafar Chaudhry Saab. Some of you may remember who he was. He passed away recently, and he was someone I remember very fondly from my youth. We would have our salat. The question often comes up: how do you connect your youth to your children to Jamaat? How do you connect them to the faith? And it always comes back to salat. And any time that we came together, it was common in our homes, at least once, if not several salats, would be offered in congregation. And the same thing would happen there at the halqa level. So those were those early salat centers, and those are my earliest memories. It was it was not meant, it may have been, it will mention in the future that Hazrat Chaudhry Zafrullah Khan Sahib, Raziyallahu anhu, was also a frequent visitor to the New York area. And I have, alhamdulillah, again, in my youth, there were times where I can remember his visit, coming and staying at my grandparents' home, and we had the honor of being in his presence. One time we were driving back from he had gone to attend the Jalsa in Toronto, and so we drove back together. And as I learned in Sesame Street, if you want to know if it's raining, you put your hands out. So we had stopped somewhere, and I put my hands out because I felt there was some rain happening. And Chaudhry Sahib asked me, "Why are you putting your hands out?" And I said, "Hazrat Chaudhry Sahib, I'm Chaudhry Sahib. I just checking to see if it rains." And I just saw him laugh. He thought that was a very simple way of knowing if it's raining or not. There are other many stories that I love to share. One I actually took from Ijaz Malik Saab. He was one of our pioneers in New York, and he was doing more. I asked him, so when Chaudhry Saab used to come, I was too young. I didn't know um, what his exact, what he was doing here. And he said, oh, he was actually visiting many dignitaries in Manhattan and so on. And he would go and take him to those different meetings. And he mentioned one time that he had invited Hazrat Chaudhry Sahib to his own home. Now, Ijaz Malik Sahib at that time was not married. He was a bachelor studying. And he said, Chaudhry Sahib, whatever I can make, you can come to my home and have it. So they set a date, and Hazrat Chaudhry Sahib came, and he came to the door. And Ijaz Malik Sahib looking outside to see where the limo is, where the driver is. He said, "No, I'm coming by subway. I came by the subway, and this is the stops I took." And all by himself, think of this: a companion of Hazrat Masih alayhi salam using the subway to come, and that man of that such high stature, who held such high positions in the world, had come in such a simple way to have that food. And then Ijaz Malik Saab mentioned to me how he had put too much salt in it, and Chaudhry Saab ate it, and then when he finally took a taste of it, he realized that he had put extra salt. He had forgotten that he already put the salt in once. And when he asked Chaudhry Saab, I'm so sorry, I put extra salt in there. I didn't realize it. He goes, I know, but you tried your best. So that's the examples that we have of such spiritual heroes of our time, and who graced our paths here in New York. Hazrat Khalifatul Masih, Rabi Rahmatullah, he also visited New York many times. There was one time before his Khilafat, I remember that as well, and he visited many of our homes. And my father used to tell me how, New York is its own, as we say, its own beast. It's a great place to live. It's a lot to do, a lot to see. The city never sleeps. But at the same time, there's a lot of stress that comes with that, especially when it comes to traffic. And so my father was responsible for taking him back to the airport, and he had to be there, at a certain time, and my father couldn't get off at work on time. And so he rushed, and, at the last minute, he was able to get there. And my grandfather was pacing on the driveway, wondering when, his son-in-law would come and pick him up and take Hazrat Mia Saab at that time to the airport. So these are the young memories I have. My brothers here and my uncles here of New York Jamaat will remember that Hazur, when he came to New York, he made sure to make a trip to stop by New York, even though it was a quick trip on one of his visits. And he said, "How can I come to the U.S. and not come to New York?" So we're very blessed to have that honor and that recognition, and that Hazur's prayers for us. And alhamdulillah, and several times we had the ability to host Hazur. And one time in particular, I can remember we were at the Marriott Hotel, again near LaGuardia Airport, and Hazur had given a speech, and many dignitaries were there. And most of the dignitaries, they give their speech and go. But this one man, he was the mayor of Glen Cove, and he actually went and said a few words and met Hazur at the end. He waited till the very end before Hazur left, before going back to his personal life. And Masha, that person now is, sitting in Congress, and, however you feel politically, he's been a big advocate for our Jamaat members and done great service for us. And I think it was that meeting and that love that he saw, and that earnestness that he saw from Hazur at that time, that has made him very endeared to he's become very endeared to our Jamaat. We've had so many other dignitaries, so many other Jamaat leaders have come through. Amir Abdullah Waghas Sahab has visited and ran the New York Marathon. I was a guide at that time, and I know my brothers remember when you know, when we were part of that experience and tried to meet him in certain spots, and we saw him in Brooklyn, and we saw him in received him in Manhattan when he finished the race. Um, Amir Abdul Wahab Adam Saab marhum of Ghana, he also came, and there's so many others. I'd be dishonoring so many of the um, those devotees of our Jamaat who visited New York. But that's just what the New York does. Alhamdulillah, is that gateway for so many to come and see the U.S. and meet others. Umar Bilal Ibrahim Saab was the president, later on the vice president of New York Jamaat in my youth, and he had that iconic topi and this nice, well-kept beard. And you talk about barbershop tabligh, he's one of those who did that. He had his own barbershop, and so many brothers entered our Jamaat through the tabligh he would do there. But yet he was a connector. He connected with people around him. He connected with us. And I don't know if my brothers remember, but when he passed away, I think it hit all of us. It was a sudden passing, and it hit all of us quite hard. And the love that he showed for us, we tried a little bit of something to do it. With a few dollars in our pockets, we quickly rented 2 minivans and drove to North Carolina, where he was having his funeral. And that was a very memorable trip. When I think about my youth, that was one of those core memories, because of just how we bootstrapped and you know rented the 2 cars within an hour's time and drove down. And Muhammad Ahmad Chaudhry, if you remember, Mansoor Bhai, so many, Khurram Badra, so many of you, I remember we were on that trip, and we rented a Motel 6, got one room so we could quickly shower, and then made it there for the janaza, and then drove back and for the burial. So alhamdulillah, those are just those memories that you have of your youth, and because of those connections you make with so many of these spiritual elites who come and have stayed in New York. At some point, you're going to be seeing a bunch of pictures, and you're going to see a picture of a man named Nazir Ayaz. Nazir Ayaz was our president. He was the uncle for me growing up. Uh, we miss him quite a lot whenever I come to the city. He is such an inspiration, has been such an inspiration for so many decades. He served the Jamaat so tirelessly. And when you see pictures of him, those are very few, because he was a behind the scenes leader. And it was through this Jamaat and the energy of the New York Jamaat that we learned to participate and take active role in the Jamaat. And he found a way to find anyone. If you wanted to work and serve the Jamaat, there's no way he didn't find you. And from 7th grade, I remember him giving me small duties, testing me out, seeing what I could do before giving me other more responsibilities. And I'm sure my brothers and sisters will remember, how he, as youth, he would recruit us to do different types of works. And we are grateful, because that set the foundation for our service moving ahead, his way of delegation. At times you work with Ayasab and maybe something didn't quite right the way he wanted, and he was right. Don't get me wrong, he was right that it was not the way it should have been. He would get mad, never a grudge. 15 minutes later, it was as if it never happened, whatever mistake you made. And that's something that I always cherish and try to do my best in my dealings and working with others. Some of the I know my time is tight, but I do want to make sure that I give time for so many different memories that are there. Tahir class was one thing that was initiated. I'm sure that it will be mentioning that as well. Back in '85 is when Tahir class first started, and Hazrat Sheikh Saab also, Sheikh Mubarak Ahmad Saab came and was there for that inauguration as well. And that was so foundational, so important and crucial for my own spiritual development. I'm so grateful to Maulana Inamullah Kosar Saab as our teacher in comparative studies, and then later on it was Maulana Mukhtar Chima Saab who then taught us. Abdul Hadi Nasir Saab was instrumental in my understanding of the Holy Quran, understanding its word by word meaning, And then there's so many countless others, and I'm doing disservice by not mentioning their names, but if I say any more names, then I would be doing even greater disservice. But there were so many other uncles who taught us throughout that time, and it was so important to have that regular cycle of instruction to supplement whatever my parents were doing at home. There's so many other memories I've jotted down here. I do also want to mention that, you know, one thing that Yasab had inscripted before was for the work in bookstalls. And bookstalls, you know, in Manhattan means that we go and we would, you know, set up bookstalls and sell our books and walk with pamphlets down Manhattan. And you think about this, I was maybe 13, 14 years old, and maybe the times were different, but you know, your parents would send you off on your own, and you were under the care of the Jamaat. And Alhamdulillah, during that time, we were able to go and do great, you know, doing service and getting that fluidity, being able to be fluent and being able to go and speak with others about our faith. And you know, something that, you know, I've been remiss in my own children to afford that, or you know, create that opportunities for them to do so, because that independence that we learn, and New York is a place where you can be independent, where you can be Hazrat Chaudhry Saab and jump on a subway and get where you need to go. And in the same way here, New York has been that way. In the end, I just want to say that, you know, New York in general, as Brother Harris shared before, it's probably the most celebrated city in the world. It's got the most photographs. You can Google it. You know, from I Love Lucy to The Honeymooners to Law and Order and Friends, it's where it's situated. Frank Sinatra and Alicia Keys, they sang songs about New York. It was the origination of Alexander Hamilton and now Donald J. Trump, right? It's not just a place, it's a character. And it's also, I feel, it's been a character in our Jamaat story as well. Perhaps the villain sometimes, perhaps the hero, but New York has been a presence in our U.S. history. And I hope and pray you'll continue to pray for us and allow us to use the good elements of New York to better promote the mission and the true Islam uh, as taught to us by Hazrat Masih alayhi salam. Jazakallah, brothers, for this opportunity to share some memories.
Next, I request respected Rafi Ahmed Sahib, who is a Sadr Jamaat, Brooklyn Jamaat, and he will talk about mission houses and Sadran of New York Jamaat.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. To our viewers who are present and to all those who are watching this webinar on Zoom. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. On this segment of our webinar, we are going to be talking about the mission houses of New York City, and we are going back to 1947-48 when we had a place in Manhattan on 138th Street, West 138th Street, which is Harlem. And this mission house or place of worship, at that time, missionary Chaudhry Ghulam Yasin Sahab was the missionary at that time. From 1948 to 54, we moved to another location in Manhattan on 115 West 116th Street. And again, Ghulam Yasin Sahab was the missionary, and there we were for a period of 6 years, 1948 to 1954. Moving on from 1954 to 1957, we changed the location and we came closer to Midtown Manhattan, which is West 37th Street. And we were on the west side of Manhattan on 265 West 37th Street. And in this period also we had Ghulam Yasin Sahab as the as the missionary. And at that time, I would say in that period, there were more families, Afro-American families, and a few of the, I would say hardly any of us from Pakistan or from India or from Bangladesh. Primarily, it was local New Yorkers, and most of them were Afro-Americans. Then moving on from 1957 to 1960, we had a location again in Upper West Side of Manhattan, that is on 118 West 87th Street. And here the missionary at that time, from 57 to 60, was same Ghulam Yasin Sahab, yeah. Moving on from 60 to 73, from 1960 to 1973, we moved to Queens on Archer Avenue in Jamaica in Queens. And even then, I believe Ghulam Yasin Sahab, Shoaib, if I'm, that was the missionary. And then going on further from 74 to 81, we moved to Brooklyn, 1064 Union Street, where when I came to the US, I came in 1978, and at that time we had Masood Jailmi Saab, who was the Muballigh of the New York Jamaat, and so this period of 74 to 81, a period of seven years, was in the Brooklyn Mission House. And at that time, the New York Jamaat was comprised of not only New Yorkers, but also members from New Jersey, from Connecticut. And New York was also, the Jamaats, rather the members of New York were going up to almost Rochester and upstate New York. So it was only one Jamaat, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. We were all gathered in at this location. And then, moving on from 1981 to 1984, we had to sell this property in Brooklyn because it was not a very good neighborhood. And people who used to come there would get mugged, especially our Pakistani brothers who didn't know. And it was not the right location for us to be in. So we decided to sell it and move on. But we sold this property in 1981. And from 1981 to 1984, we did not have any place in New York for our mosque or for a mission house. And I remember Salim Ahmed Sahab, who has served the Jamaat, the New York Jamaat, as the financial secretary for a long time, very dedicated and very sincere member of our Jamaat. He used to say, we have become orphans. We don't have a place to worship. We don't have. So, alhamdulillah, later on, under the Khalifa Rabi' Rahimullah's time, the five mission project was initiated, and one of the five mosques was for the New York area. So we were able to purchase in 1984 the property on Palo Alto 86-71 Palo Alto Street in Queens, which is just a few blocks from here. And this was our New York, Metro New York, and also that time Brooklyn, Long Island, Queens, Bronx. We all used to gather here. And alhamdulillah, in this mission house, we had good fortune, the blessings of Hazrat Khalifa Rabi Rahimullah, who came and, we had the first Majlis-e Shura of, in this masjid. But I forgot to mention going back to the Union Street location, Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Salis Rahimullah, he visited in 1977 in this location in Brooklyn. And I should have mentioned that earlier, but just came to my mind. Going from 1984 to 2008, we were at this Palo Alto location. That would be a period of 14 years. And after that, in 2008, we were blessed with this beautiful mosque, the one on McLaughlin Avenue, which we are all now presently sitting. And this is a beautiful mosque, and a lot of work has gone into it. And we also had the good opportunity of building a replica of Minaratul Masih here, which is very beautiful. And the location here is so nice that people on the highway can see our location. And it's a very good promotion for our Jamaat, alhamdulillah. And we are really grateful to Allah that He has given us such a beautiful place and the members here. In this period from 2003, before that, in fact, we started to branch out. So the Brooklyn Jamaat was, we had to branch out to Brooklyn Jamaat, to Long Island Jamaat, to Bronx Jamaat. And the Queens Jamaat. So there were 4 Jamaats in the period of 2001, 2002. And in 2003, we purchased the property in Brooklyn on West 8th Street, which is our current mission house or mosque in Brooklyn. And we have a good number of members. The Brooklyn Jamaat also consists members from the Staten Island. And it's the things are progressing that those who are Brooklyn Jamaat members, most of them have moved to Staten Island, and now in the long run we are planning to have a place in Staten Island. Also in this period, the Long Island property was acquired in 2003. And this is on Union Avenue in Amityville in New York. And also in 2004, the Bronx Masjid, or rather the Bronx Mission House, was purchased, which is on White Plains Road in Bronx, New York. So these are the mosque and mission houses of New York that we have, seen through the years. And now we move on to the presidents of New York. The first president of New York was Abid Hanif Sahab, who was the president of the New York Jamaat from 1956 to 59. And if you know, Abid Hanif Saab is the father of our present missionary in charge, Azhar Hanif Sahab. And Abid Hanif Saab had a great love for Quran, for the Ahmadiyyat. And this was exemplified in his son, Azhar Hanif Sahab, who went to Jamia in Rabwa and started speaking fluently in Urdu. And now he's by the grace of Allah, our missionary in charge for the US Jamaat. Going back to Abid Hanif Saab, he stayed in New York from 1948 to 1961. Before that, he served the Jamaat as financial secretary and as vice president from 1950 to 54. He also served as Qaid Majlis Khudam al-Ahmadiyya in the late 50s. From 59 to 60 and 72 to 73, we had Muhammad Sadiq Sahab, who was a very, very pious person, as mentioned by Muzammil Jamil. He had the opportunity of meeting him, and whoever met him, for that matter, was left, with a very holy influence that he had on us, and he was a God-fearing, loving person, and unfortunately, later in his life, he started losing sight, but he would recognize each of us by just, knowing us, and would be able to identify us in some way or the other. So he was a musician, as told, he was a jazz musician, and he accepted Ahmadiyyat in 1947. He visited Qadian and Rabwa several times, and he had the good fortune of meeting Khalifatul Masih Salis and Khalifa Rabi Rahimullah. He was very pious, as mentioned, and his prayers used to get accepted by Allah's grace. Moving on, we had from 1960 to 72 and 73 to 81, Bashir Afzal Sahab, who was from a Christian family and who accepted Ahmadiyyat in 1934. So I remember also meeting Bashir Afzal Sahab when he was Sadr of the New York Jamaat, and he was also a very humble, pious person, and he served the Jamaat in this period. Then we come to more modern, rather more later stage in our New York history in the 80s, in 81 and 82. Brother Umar Bilal Ibrahim Sahab accepted Ahmadiyyat in 1969 at Archer Avenue in New York. He was the regional Qaid of Khuddam in 70 for the period of 6 years, from 72 to 78. He had fond memories of Khalifatul Masih Salis, Khalifa Rabi Rahimullah visit to New York. I came to know him in person and had spent quite some time with him. In fact, I remember he was he had a barber shop, and when my first son was born, we had the Brother Umar Bilal Ibrahim come and do the shaving of the head, and so I have a personal connection with him because of meeting him in Jumas and in Brooklyn at the Union Street location. And he was a wonderful person, I recall. Then after he passed away in 1982, we had our very dear, respected Nazir Ahmad Ayaz Sahab, who served the New York Jamaat from 1982 to 2016. I have been with Nazir Ayaz Sahab and served during his tenure as the General Secretary for a long time, known him in person, and he was an excellent administrator. He would know the good qualities of a person, and he would assign duties to those people based on the qualities they had, always, being encouraging and telling them to, perform their duties. And then he would call us. If he has given us a duty, he would call us a day or two later. He said, "Have you done it?" And then we say, "I'll do it." So he said, "Get it done. I'll get it done and get it over with." So Nazir Ayaz Sahab, excellent administrator, and he has served the Jamaat throughout his life, I would say, from the time he became president until he passed away. He served the New York Jamaat as the president, and Iqbal Sahab also was part of and I know that he also has been serving the New York Jamaat, and by Allah's grace, he's been serving Markaz for quite some time, and we all work together and try to bring up the progress of our Jamaat here in New York. So Nazir Sahab reached New York in 77, and immediately he started serving the Jamaat, and he remained the president of New York Jamaat for 35 years. He was one of those persons, one of the presidents, which is unique, that almost every day he would come to the mosque and make sure everything is okay, and whatever needs to be done, he would do it. And it was, there was not a day, I would say, when he would not come to the mosque after his work. So it was part of his life. He was very regular in masjid for prayers. He used to send letters and emails to members coming to masjid. He made arrangements of different sport activities in masjid to attract boys and girls. In this regard, I would say that he approached me and said, "Why don't you start a table tennis, team?" And similarly, he initiated the basketball and other sports team. So he's been very instrumental in encouraging sports and also extracurricular activities. And then he has many contributions in starting the Tahir Academy, the Tahir school where all our kids grew up and attended Tahir school. It was the vision of Nazir Ahmad Sahab who started this, and now we know that by Allah's grace, how our children are benefiting from this Tahir Academy. He also served Humanity First very dedicatedly, and he was the director of Humanity First. He was a Musi, and he was buried in Long Island in Maqbara Musian. Khalifatul Masih Rabi Rahimullah said about him, he is an exemplary president, no doubt about that. With this, I will pass on to the next speaker.
Jazakumullah Hasan al Jaza. Now I request respected Ali Murtaza Sahib. He accepted Ahmadiyya and he will talk about his acceptance.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Dear brothers and sisters, respected panelists, Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. My acceptance of Ahmadiyya actually started when I came to New York City. I'm not as beautiful as New York City is. I'm not a native New Yorker. I migrated. I migrated from Atlantic City, New Jersey, but before I was in Atlantic City, New Jersey, I was in North Carolina, which is where I'm at now. I'm not in New York, but just visiting because of the janazah in the family. But in 1975, when I came out of the military service, my mother, who was the best friend of another brother who lived in New York, my mother had passed away when I was in the military, and I was in New York, and the friend of my mother, she says, like, you should get in contact with my son so he can show you around. And she gave me his phone number, and I had known him. Maybe I saw him a couple of times or so, but I really didn't know him well. But I know he was like, he was the kind of guy that, like, he automatically drew attention because of the way his style and his personality. So I called him up, and he says, "Okay." He says, let's get together." He says, like, let's go to dinner. And the first time I've ever had Indian food, loved it. So we're sitting there and we're having some Indian food, and uh, conversation goes towards question. He says, listen, he says, what do you know about Islam? I said, well, I just knew a little bit about it based on what history and, when you go to school and they talk to you about the Moors and so forth. He says, let me give you this book and then read it and tell me what you think. I says, okay, thank you. He gave me the book that was called The Philosophy and Teachings of Islam. And I had no background, no interest, nothing at all that basically drew my attention towards Islam whatsoever. But this book was given to me as a gift, so it kind of I just said, okay, I'll take a read of it. But I was not an avid reader, and when I started to read this book, the subject matter was of such a difference to me that I really couldn't grab a hold of it. So I struggled with reading the book for a good 3 years, 3 years to read the philosophy and teachings of Islam. But it was like every page made me more interested in this Islam. What's it talking about? And I would, go to bookstores and I would browse and I would get books, any books I could find in English on Islam. So gradually, the philosophy and teachings of Islam was actually developing, some kind of a quality in me of an interest for Islam. So during this time, I had gotten employment because I was in the military, as I mentioned, and I got an employment to travel to Iran for employment. And I said, okay, it sounds interesting, and I wanted to get out of New York, and the salary sounded very, very promising. So I said, okay, let's do that. So I went to Iran and was like really a shock because even in the military, I had gone to different places, but I'd never been to a Islamic country, a country that was just, Muslims. And the women wearing the shadoras and, just like a different lifestyle as it may be. So I got to know a little bit about the Muslims there and all the beautiful mosque and so forth. And I was learning some of the prayers because I'd also gotten some prayer books from brother Akbar Musafiri Tashaka. He is a brother who gave me the philosophy and teachings of Islam by the grace of Allah, and we remained friends ever since. Um, when I was in Iran, I watched carefully what they did and how they did it and so forth. So I would go to the mosque and they prayed, how they prayed. I tried to learn how to pray how they prayed. But I wasn't a Muslim still, but I was still leaning towards Islam because it has such a beautiful message. But there was still certain things that I really wasn't clear about. But nevertheless, I was very interested. So the Shia, they have a way of praying. They use what's called a Moor stone. They say that this is a stone. It's part of. I think the way they described it, it is part of the earth either of Mecca or Karbala, one of the two, and it has such a reverence that they need to make their prostration on the earth that belongs to these two sites, and that's the understanding behind it. So I got the Moor stone, and I was making my prostrations, and I was raising my hand after saying Allahu Akbar, the same as they did. And my assignment in Iran concluded after 3 months. Didn't stay there very long, but it was enough time for me to have a real good taste. Actually, I did take Shahada in Iran at the place called the Baitul Fatimi Mosque by Ayatollah Mikarami Shirazi. He was one of the foot soldiers, I call him, of Ayatollah Khomeini. But you couldn't talk about it. You couldn't talk about that in Iran because, as my friend Hussein Rajabi, who was my guide when I was there in Iran, he says the walls have ears, so be careful when you talk about any of the close associates of Imam Khomeini. So anyhow, after the assignment ended, came back to New York, and I was excited now because now I'm a Muslim and I'm starting to live my life as a Muslim and so forth. So I go to, got another job, but like, in the town out at the time, I was working downtown Manhattan. I think it was on Ward Street, and there was a mosque that the Muslims would go to, a Sunni mosque. So I went to the Sunni mosque and I was praying, and as I was praying, I raised my hand, and after the prayer was over, one brother came up. He said, "Why are you praying like that?" I said, I don't understand. What do you mean?" He said, "Why are you raising your hand? We don't pray we don't pray that way." I said, "Okay." I was, so this this damaged my impression of Islam, unfortunately. So it made me feel that there was something about the Muslims I still had not completely understood. And over time, going forward, I had lost contact with my brother Akbar, because of time and circumstance. But then the Iran-Iraq war started, and I was really disturbed about that. How could Muslims be fighting Muslims? And so during this time, there was an advertisement that Brother Akbar had made me aware of. He says, there's going to be a Quran exhibition at the Sheraton Hotel. He said, "Would you like to go?" I says, "Yeah, I'd like to check that out." So together we went to the Sheraton Hotel, and of course, the man that you mentioned earlier, that is such a dynamic individual. We could spend this whole webinar just talking about Nasir Yaz, because he has such a he was an interesting man, and he was very dedicated. And the word dedication is in capital letters throughout. Anyhow, he was basically overseeing the the Quran exhibition. And as he saw us, he came over, he talked to us, nothing pressure wise, just wanted to, make sure that, like, we were comfortable. If there's anything that you see that you like, let me know, and so forth. So, but he kept his eye on us. So just as we were getting ready to leave, he said, "Listen, before you leave," he says, "like, I want to let you know that next Sunday, we're going to have a special program, and I'd like you to come to be my guest at the mosque in Queens." And so he gave us the address and so forth. And it happened to be on Promised Messiah Day. Now, as I mentioned, I had already been converted. I had already accepted Islam, but I had stopped being interested in Islam because of that particular treatment that I felt from the Sunni mosque. So okay, I said, "Okay, let's go." Akbar says, "Like, you want to go?" I said, "Yeah, I like to go. I like to go." So by this time, there was the back and forth, like times I would, like, just just basically visits to the Union Street Mosque when Marabi Jelmi was there, Brother Umar Bilal Ibrahim, and there was another brother by Muhammad Jamal Isa who had a bookstore kind of, I think, almost next door. But I, went there very sporadically. I wasn't a regular attendant because I lived in the Bronx at that time, and this was already all the way in Brooklyn, so it was too much of a distance for me to stay that connected. But nevertheless, all these things like culminated into my decision to go to the mosque in Queens, where we were invited to be the guests of Nasir Yaz. Now, I had already known Brother Umar Bilal Ibrahim because, like I said, I stayed in the Bronx, so he touched my head too. And occasionally, because of times and circumstances, he would actually loan me money because, it was hard. Things were kind of difficult, and I wasn't working steadily. And also, there was another gentleman, quite interesting gentleman by the name of Mr. Sufi, I think his name is Mr. Sufi. He had very thick spectacles. And on one occasion when I was coming from Brother Umar's barbershop, he looked at me. He says, rather strangely, he says, "Haven't I seen you before? I've seen you someplace before." And I had never seen a man in my life. I said, "Well, I don't know. Maybe it's someone that looks like me." He said, "No, it was you. It was you." So I left it at that, and time went on. So on this occasion, when we went to the mosque in Queens on Promised Messiah's Day, as soon as I walked in, I was listening to speeches that was being uh, passionately delivered by Irfan Aladdin, and then I saw Brother Umar, and I saw Brother Nuruddin, both of whom I had seen before, but I lost contact with them because I wasn't regularly attending the Union Street Mosque, and wasn't regularly seeing them. So I saw them, and like, that a spirit of the feeling took over me, because during this time when like the Iraq war was going, was in its development, I had learned surahs of the Quran, but I had stopped practicing, and I lost all of the surahs of the Quran except Surah Al-Fatiha. So I had kept that part of the Surah Fatiha in mind when it says, Idina Surat al-Mustaqim. I says, oh Allah, I said, I don't know what path you want me to take, but show me what path you want me to take. Whether I should be a Christian, whether I should be a Muslim over here or Muslim over there. I said, just show me what path I should take, because I felt lost. I didn't feel like I had anchored any place, and I needed an anchor. I needed to feel that I was spiritually secure, spiritually at peace. So when I saw these brothers in Bear to Zafa, the one that on Palo Alto Street, and it was sitting down, and it looked like just a radiance that was effusing from them. And I felt so at home. I felt so good, so comfortable. The environment just felt so welcoming. So as I and Brother Akbar took our seat on the floor and we started to listen to the speeches came to a close. And at this time, Marabi Mukhtar Chima was the missionary. And Nasir Yaz came to the podium, and he was thanking everybody for their participation in the Surah Nabi Day, in the Maslimal Day program. And he said to the congregation, he says, there are two Ahmadis that have been away they have been away from the Jamaat for a while. I'd like for you to welcome them back, and so forth. And when he said that, a sense of need to be corrected came across me, because I felt that I was being misrepresented as an Ahmadi when I was not. And I, told Brother Akbar, I said, listen, I says, I think he thinks that I'm an Ahmadi. I said, but I'm not an Ahmadi. He said, well, go ahead, tell him, correct him. And so I was getting up, because now that, the crowd was kind of shifting a little bit. So I got up and I went up towards Nasir Yaz, where he was. And as I was getting up to explain to him that I was not an Ahmadi, that prayer came back to me. It's like a light bulb that went off that says, you've been saying, Idina Sirat al-Mustaqim, God show you the right way. And this is where you have found yourself feeling as if you belong. So at that moment that I was going to tell Yasab that I wasn't an Ahmadi, I told him, I said, Yasab, I said, I'm sorry, but I'm not an Ahmadi, but I would like to accept Ahmadiyya today. He says, oh, you're not an Ahmadi. I said, no, I'm not an Ahmadi. I would like to accept Ahmadi today. So then he spoke to Chima Saab, and Chima Saab has said, he said, I'd like for everybody to be seated, because we have a gentleman now that is going to accept Bayat. He's going to do Bayat today. So on the 23rd of March in 1991 is when I accepted Ahmadiyyat to be the path, my journey to the true Islam that I wanted to take. And there was no reservations anymore. There was no uncertainties. There was like a concept of complete certainty that was there. So from March 23rd, 1991, my journey in Ahmadiyyat started. But I couldn't rest there. I wanted to get to Qadian. I had to, my interest was, I need now to go to the hometown where the promised Messiah is, because I felt that I needed to go directly to the promised Messiah, salam, and let him know that I had accepted him. So during this time, another occasion, Khalifatu Rabi Rahmatullahi was also coming to visit New York. And at this time, I had just, maybe like about a week had been in Ahmadiyyat. And the brothers wanted me to, perform security with the Khalifa. I said, what do you, what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to perform Khalifa, security with the Khalifa? I couldn't believe they were going to entrust me, a newcomer, to be on the security detail for the most auspicious personality for me in the world. I mean, I never met a Khalifa, and this was the first time. And there was some other things that I'm just glossing over really fast, and I'm even taking up too much time. But still, it's so many floods of memories that come through. But nevertheless, I was on duty, and they gave me the duty for being at the door when there was guests, where Kazua was like basically having a question and answer session, and I was told strictly, do not let anybody pass this door. So one Ahmadi brother who was very convincing asked me if he could go through, and I told him, I said, I'm not supposed to go. He said, no, it's okay for me. I said, okay. So I let him in, and then the one who put me in charge came back, and he gave me such a lashing. I mean, just, not physically, but, how could you do that? I told you not to let anybody through. I said, okay, I'm sorry. Anyhow, I did get the opportunity to go to Qadian in that same year. As a matter of fact, I think I was the only African-American that went to Qadian that year. And it was a very special year because it was the first time that the Khalifa had returned to Qadian after 47 years. So it was one of those very special occasions. And it also has many stories with it, which I can't go into now. But nevertheless, to tell you that my acceptance of Ahmadiyya started with the mother of my friend, Akbar Musafiri Tashaka, even though she didn't know it, by her having me introduced to her son, who in turn introduced me to the philosophy and teachings of Islam. And it also led to Nasir Yaz inviting us to the mosque, which led me to accepting Ahmadiyya on March 23rd, 1901. Continue to pray for me and my family. Jazakumullah for listening. Sorry to take so much time.
Now I request Zaki Bajwa Sahib, who will talk about Khulafa and other prominent members visited New York Jamaat.
Auzubillahi minash shaitanir rajeem, bismillahir rahmanir rahim. I'm going to spend a few minutes just talking about the prominent visits of various Khulafa as well as other prominent members to our Jamaat. So I won't take up too much time, but the first Khalifa to have presence in the US was Hazrat Mirza Nasir Ahmad, as you can see here in 1976. And from Rafi Saab, your masjid, that would be the Union Masjid in Brooklyn at the time. And so Hazur, not only did he come to New York that year, but he was in Washington, D.C., delivered speeches and met with officials there. He participated in the Joseph Solana in Dayton, Ohio that year. That was held at the Dayton Mosque. He visited the Ahmadiyya Mosque on Wabash Avenue in Chicago. And like I said, he visited New York City, and he also went to California, part of his broader U.S. tour. So we know the blessings that come with the visit of a Khulafa. We have all witnessed it recently in 2018 with Khalifa Khamis. And so this was the blessed visit of the first Khalifa on the grounds of the United States. And then from there, if you go to the next slide, you'll see Hazrat Khalifa Masih IV, who visited the U.S. 3 times. And I think a lot of us here were blessed to be here in all 3 of those years, 87, 91, and 94. And I'm happy to say he came to New York all 3 of those years as well. Hazur had a pretty broad visit in all 3 of those years. I won't hit each of the years, but just a couple of quick highlights. He presided over Majlis al-Shura and other addresses in New York City. He delivered the famous Detroit address about racial equality in 1987 in Detroit, Michigan. He laid the foundation stone for Battle Hamid Mosque on October 23rd, 1987 in Chino, California. He also inaugurated the Rizwan Mosque in Portland, Oregon that same year. And he also participated in various community events in Chicago, Illinois, as well as laying the mosque foundation in Houston and various dignitary meetings in Washington, D.C. But from all of us that were here at those times, you remember, us just having a very festive environment when Hazur's in town. Pretty much giving up work, giving up school, just, as groupies almost chasing after our beloved Khalifa wherever they go, doing whatever duty is called upon, whether it's security, whether it's food, whether it's transportation or whatnot. My Abuji actually drove him for one visit as well. The whole week, he was the driver for Khalifatul Rabi, and just some fond memories from all of us there. So again, we were very blessed to have Hazur visit us in the Palo Alto Mosque, and Rizwan Bhai's family house is where he stayed 2 out of the 3 visits. And on one of the visits, we had a Ahmadi brother who had a mosque, who had a house about 5 houses away from the mosque, and Hazur would walk back and forth from there. So just a very festive, blessed visit all 3 times. And one of the memories that I recall from Khalifa Rabi's visits were the battle, the question and answers that he would do in the evenings with us, and just, enlightenment after enlightenment of just the wealth of knowledge that he possessed and the natural ability to speak for hours on any topic. And we were just blessed to be witness for that remarkable human being that he was. So that was Khalifa Rabi. You can see some of the highlights here. And then if you go to the next slide, we'll talk about a few other prominent guests. So you can see the pictures here. This is in front of that house that I was talking about on Palo Alto Street with Sheikh Saab there, Khalifa Rabi, all the prominent members of the Jamaat, some that we're still blessed to have with us. Ayaz Saab on the bottom right. So just beautiful memories. As a young kid, just seeing Hazur, being able to have mulaqat with him, being able to ask for prayer, and seeing the love that he had for each and every person in the Jamaat just brought us very close to Jamaat, and I would say, kept us out of harm's way as much as possible due to his prayers for every member of the Jamaat. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see some of the other members. In I believe 1986 again, I'm sorry, 1976, both Chaudhry Zafrullah Khan Saab as well as Dr. Abdul Salam visited New York 81, visited New York to do several events in United Nations. This is where Dr. Abdul Salam did various scientific Islamic country organizations that he presented to, coordinated different events with, and Zafrullah Khan Saab really introduced him to the whole UN bureaucracy, if you will. And as you can see here, Chaudhry Saab also led lectures in some of the universities also. And then Dr. Abdul Salam actually came once again in New York. I'm going to say it was 91 maybe, or 92. I don't know if somebody remembers that date, but it's not on here. And a lot of us were fortunate enough to have mulaqats with him in the Palo Alto Mosque again. I think most of us have pictures of him there. And you can see the picture of Chaudhry Zafrullah Khan Saab and then Dr. Salam underneath. You go to the next slide. And here's some other prominent members. You can see Sheikh Saab in the middle there. On the right of him is Ahmad Saab, who is our national Amir for years. And then on the left of him is Muzaffar Saab, I believe his name was, who was also Naib Amir for years with us, as well as other members of the Jamaat, including our own Murabi Saab, looking young and dashing there. Okay, I think those are it. Any other slide after that? Okay, excellent. So that was it. Just a few beautiful memories of both Khulafa as well as prominent members visiting the Jamaat and blessing us with their visits. Jazakallah.
Jazakumullah, Zaki Baja Sahib. Now I invite respected Dr. Shahid Ahmed Sahib, and he will talk about living through New York Jamaat. I think he came early 70s in this city and country. 67. He came 1967 to this city and country. And he has great memory of the history of Ahmadiyyat. So I invite Dr. Shahid Sahib, please.
Assalamu alaikum. Do you hear me? Huh? Yeah, that's what I'm doing here.
Yes, we can hear you. Assalamu alaikum. Can you unmute yourself again?
You hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Jazakallah.
So I was saying that, it was long due that this webinar, which has brought out the important role that New York City played in the history of Ahmadiyya in USA, really. As you have already listened to several speakers who have gone over every area, how the members, how the dignitaries, how the missionaries were here, and the visits of the Khulafa. So looking at, I came in, as was said, in 1967. 1 year I spent in upstate Poughkeepsie, and I was totally out of touch with the Jamaat because there was no Jamaat in Poughkeepsie, which was about 110 miles away from New York City. However, in 1968, when I came into Brooklyn, at that time, the Jamaat was almost non-existing because there was no place of worship. There was one area that we would rent, which was already done before I even knew. This was a top floor of a bar where the Jummah prayers were given. For whatever reason, maybe it was economic reasons, that we had to rent this place in Queens. And I remember, downstairs there'll be a lot of music played. And we had most of our brothers, Afro-American brothers, who could not resist moving, with the rhythm of the music as well. So they were getting the best of the both worlds, spiritual as well as the musical side. However, afterwards, as you have heard, we were able to acquire a place in Brooklyn, Union Street, and there we spent a few years. We were blessed with the visit of the Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Salis, and he addressed us there. And at that visit, really, there was one individual I want to mention, Dr. Majid Ali, who was the hosting Huzur, really, and he played a very big role in this visit for him, really. And he had also in the presence of the Khalifatul Masih. Salas gave a lecture on spirituality and science. This was held in Wayne University in New Jersey. Moving on, the Jamaat really then started to grow bigger, larger in number, and there was a need for, a place to house the Jamaat and carry on our functions. And in this regard, we started looking for places, and it took us a few years before we got to Palo Alto from Union Street. And from there on, you have heard all the history really of this Jamaat really. What really I see really is when we came in here, we were handful. And now the Jamaat has grown into very large numbers, and so large that we have now mosques in Long Island, we have mosque in Queens, in Staten Island, and we are looking in Brooklyn, and we are looking for a mosque in Staten Island already. So these are, and that of course with Bronx really being another mosque there, and the membership really also has increased in so many ways. People have come into the country. There are families who have come in. There are children who are born here. So the growth of the community really in these short years is mind-boggling, and it grows, and it is growing. I think it is the fastest community growing in the world really today. Inshallah, we will, as we said, our tabligh is going to be reaching the corners of the earth, and which we have already done really. Again, concentrating on the Jamaat really activity in Brooklyn, when we separated, branched out, we had no place in Brooklyn. We had a basement which was available to us on different meetings and Jummah prayers. And even there, the place was very tight, and it could not house all the members of the Jamaat, and Lajna was also an issue. So we started looking for a place, and we pleaded with our Amir Saab. At that time, it was Zafar Ehsan Saab, who was kind enough to listen to us, because we did use the word, we are orphans and we need a place really to house ourselves. And fortunately, we came across this particular place where we have our mosque now, that is the West 8th Street in Brooklyn, between Bay Parkway and Avenue O. And from the little basement, when we got into this place, I remember my son really, when he walked in, he could not believe that such a big place we have now, which is, by the way, is very short now, small place for the membership that we have now really. In this meantime, we also really were very short of the missionaries. The missionaries were assigned, I remember one of the missionary, Kausar Sahab, he had 8 Jamaats under him. And he would get into the car, and for 6-7 days, he'll be in the car for a few hours, go to one Jamaat, another Jamaat. And I used to joke with him that Kausar Sahab is everywhere but nowhere, because his time was so well occupied really that he had very little time to speak to individuals. However, he really did a great job in organizing the Jamaat of Brooklyn, and devoted, because he was housed in Brooklyn really, so gave us some extra time really. Missionaries in Brooklyn Jamaat We had Major Hamid Sahab, we had Jalmi Sahab, we had Siddiq Shahid Sahab, we had also Ibrahim Jamuni Sahab, and these were the missionaries who were mostly in the Union Street, and that place became very unsafe because these missionaries were kind of threatened by the people in that area, and one or two of them were even mugged really. So we decided to sell this place and look for a new place, and we were given the place of Palo Alto. The visits of Huzur, especially I remember Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Rabi, before he became Khalifa, he visited in 1976, I think, really. And he was a very avid speaker, and I had questioned him about how do we go about tabligh in this part of the world. And he really gave a lecture. We were coming from Long Island to Staten Island, and I did not realize that he covered within talk. I couldn't realize we had already reached home, really. He was such a speaker, emotional speaker too, yeah. I remember he was also a great traveler and acquired a lot of experience in traveling. He would drive himself, really. We had a very sporty car at home, and he said he would like to take this and move around. So he took this car and was driving, probably he went to Virginia and was driving where it was 60 miles speed. He was going at 80 miles per hour. And he even overtook the policeman, not realizing what he did really. So he stopped him and asked him, do you know what speed you are going? He said, very innocently, he said, honestly, I did not know what speed I was going. He said, you were driving 60 miles at a speed which was no more than 60 miles. So in 80 miles, you're driving at, in a speed limits of 60 miles. And then he asked him, where are you from? And Huzur at that time mentioned to him that, you have such beautiful, powerful cars, and you have such beautiful highways, and you put such limits on your speed limits that it's very difficult for you to avoid the temptation, really. So this policeman let him go, really, without giving him a ticket, really. So Huzur had his way of dealing with every segment of people in a very nice way, and they will always have a smile when they parted from each other, Yeah. So these are few memories I have of him. There are many, but I can't get them right now. I remember a lot of dignitaries coming in, Mirza Mubarak Ahmed Sahab, Tafsir, and Chaudhry Hamidullah Sahab was visiting us here. Aftab Ahmed Khan Sahab from London, and Sultan Mahmud Anwar Sahab. Sheikh Mubarak Sahab, of course, was eventually appointed as the missionary in charge. Ahmed Sahab visited us several times here. And, there is a long list of people who really were mentioned already. And we were very blessed in that regard. And I call, the gateway of Ahmadiyyat into United States, the New York City, really. New York City is the gateway of Ahmadiyyat in USA, really. I think this is all I would like to say for now. And whatever else I get, I guess, I want to thank Shoaib Abul Kalam and the chair, as well as Zafar Sarwar Sahab, Rafi Ahmed Sahab, and Ghafoor Sahab, who is the president of our Jamaat here. Few words were said about Nazir Yas Sahab. I call Nazir Yas Sahab the president. He was, a man who was married to two places, one to his wife, and the other one was the Queen's Jamaat, really. And he worked very hard, laid the foundation work for the entire New York Jamaat, I would say, really. And as Huzur Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Rabi said, really, he was an exemplary president. And it just tells you that when you put yourself totally into the service, your services are recognized not only by the Khalifa Waqt, really, but very much so by Almighty Lord. So I hope and pray that all our youth who have listened to this webinar go resolve to really serve the Jamaat and do their best, because it is very rewarding. And not only it's rewarding spiritually, worldly wise also you will be rewarded very much. And with this, I would take leave, and I want to thank you again, all the organizers and the Zafar Sarwar Sahab and Rafi Sahab and Ghafoor Sahab. Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum. Khuda Hafiz.
Jazakumullah Aslan Dr. Sahib. May Allah grant you long and healthy life. The next item, I request Shoaib Abul Kalam Sahib. He will talk about accomplishments of New York Jamaat.
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah for still staying in, and also I was looking online. We still have around 100 attendees. I know it's a long night. We're running over, but I'll try to brush through this very quickly, inshallah, and then we will be concluding this session. So, just wanted to capture the history in terms of the Ansarullah, the Zoma of the Majlis Ansarullah, who served starting from the very beginning, was Muhammad Sadiq Saab from 1960s. There was a lot said about him throughout this presentation, as you heard. Very dedicated and truly a New Yorker. And then I wanted to mention also Zinda Mahmud Baja Saab, who served from 1984 to 86. His photos are here. So most of the Zaim who served in New York, they're still within New York as well. Of course, our Sadr Saab right now, Abdul Ghafoor Saab, he was also Zaim from 92 to 96. We also have Iqbal Saab here, who's also our vice president serving in our Jamaat. He also served from 96 to 2000. We have also Muhammad Ahmed Chaudhry Saab. He's also here with us. He also served. And then we had Mahmoud Bhutta Saab, who's our regional Zaim Ansar of New York right now. And we also had Muhammad Zaman Saab. So this is just the history to capture. Next, wanted to talk about the Sadran also, which the Lajna Maila. So starting from the very beginning the history goes back from all the way from 1950. So Mariam Sadiq Sahaba, all the way from 1950, and we traced it all the way to the present Sadr Lajna of New York from 2018 to present right now. Then we have the Qaideen, the Qaid of Qudamul Ahmadiyya serving in New York Jamaat. So we had the first Qaid was Abed Hanif Saab, who was also it was mentioned earlier, he was also the Sadr of New York Jamaat. He also served as a Qaid of New York, and Muhammad Sadiq Saab was the first Qaid. So Muhammad Sadiq Sahib not only served as a Qaid, Hudam al-Ahmadiyya, he also served as a Zaim Ansar of New York, and he was also a Sadr of New York Jamaat. So there's a lot to say about him. Same goes for Abid Hanif Saab. And then we also had Abdul Hadi Nasir Saab. I know he joined listening to this presentation now. So he was also a Qaid, he served, and he's also been with New York Jamaat for many, many years, you know. And then we can't go through all the list, but we do have all the way up to serving as Musar Bajo Saab, who was a Qaid serving in New York presently. Some of the achievements I just want to highlight. So we had Khalil Ahmed Nasser Saab and then Nurul Haq Anwar Saab, who delivered lectures in New York American University. There were 5 speeches that were given at that time in the 1955 through radio. Another highlight we have was the National Khuddam Ijtima. Khuddam al-Ahmadiyya Ijtima was held in Staten Island back in 2004. There was a National Ansarul Ijtima that was held in New York back in 1986. And then some of the highlights for Khuddam al-Ahmadiyya is winning the Alma Inamis in the 80s, the 90s, 2000, and 2010s. The 44th Jalsa Salana USA was held in New York Institute of Technology in Long Island, New York in 1992. And then back to back, the following year, the 45th Jalsa Salana USA was also held at the same place, NYIT in Long Island in June. Also, another highlight of New York is Maulana Nurul Haq Anwar Saab. He came to serve New York missionary in 1954, and he was the first Hafiz. So for the very first time, the Taraweeh prayers was led in New York by him. And then other achievements of New York Jamaat is we had 11 students from New York who joined Jamia. 5 Murabiyan are currently serving the U.S. Jamaat, and 6 are currently enrolled in the Jamia. There is a Batu Zafar Envoy that it was a monthly newsletter that started in 1983, and it was in continuation. I know I was editor for a few years, and it continued till 2016. And then the New York Jamaat calendar, which started in 1983, and that has been ongoing since then. The annual calendar that we print, even this year we have printed. So that's been going on since 1983. One more. Yes. No. Yes. Tahir School, I know there was a lot said about Tahir School that started in 1983, and it has been active in New York Jamaat since then. This is a very old photos, I believe in the mid-80s of the Tahir camp that was held in the old Batul Zafar. And then the Masroor International Sports Tournament, which is still happening now. So this was initiated by our late Sadr Nazir Ayaz Saab back in 2008 and still going on, and started from New York. And another thing, the achievements of New York Jamaat that has been doing the Khuddam and fall sleepover in the masjid, and then cleaning the city in Manhattan, which started from the late 90s, and that's still been taking place. Another thing is the Friday sermon recording. So back then in the 80s, the Huzur's sermon used to be recorded in audio cassettes, and it used to be go in distribution for people to listen to the Friday sermon, the recordings, and they would take home and they would listen. So that started from 84. As mentioned by Sadr Long Island Rizwan Aladdin Saab, that the Jummah centers in Manhattan that used to happen, and that started from the early 80s. The Al Islam bookstore, we started in 1995 with the official Al Islam website. So, you were able to go to Al Islam and then order books, and the shipment of the books worldwide started from New York, and it was in New York till 2016. So religiously every week, Saturday we would get orders and then we would go ship it out. And this was led by Sheikh Nasir Ahmed Saab. Same goes for the Review of Religion. Review of Religion started from the 90s till 2015. We used to ship them out to various parts of the US, and that also was based in New York. And also the Al Fazl Urdu magazine that used to be sent out as well from the 90s in here. Then, the Qadian and the Rabwa style Langar Khana cooking in the USA Jalsa started from New York in 1992 during the Jalsa Salana that was held in Long Island. And before that, in the previous Jalsas, people used to cater food. And then another achievements we had was the Messiah Has Come, the Times Square billboard that majority of us went and seen. So this was to commemorate, the 100 years from 1920 to 2020. And then, we had a lot of memory on that. Another achievements we had is the Ahmadiyya Way, which, as we know that, we have a street now called Ahmadiyya Way, right, behind our masjid. So this was another achievement we had. Next. And then, of course, as discussed, the Minaratul Masih that we have. The foundations started and was laid down in 2022, and it was completed in 2024 last year. And the first brick was given to us by Huzur. And it's 85 feet height for the information. It has 4 flights and 92 stairs for the Minaratul Masih. And the last slide is some of the national office holders that held, who were from New York, were Mariam Sadiq Sahaba in the 50s, Muhammad Rafi in 1951, Zinda Mahmoud Bajo Saab served as a Naib Amir from 2007 to 2010, and then Ali Murtaza Saab as a National Tabligh Secretary from 2001 to 2012. Jazakallah. We are kind of coming to an end, so we're going to end very soon.
Jazakumullah Shoaib Sahib. Now I invite Abdul Ghafoor Sahib, Sadr Jamaat, New York Jamaat, for his closing remarks.
Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah, everybody coming is getting a little late, and I am very grateful to the respected Amir Saab who allow us to hold this webinar with the assistance of National Secretary Publication, Sayyid Sajid Ahmed Saab, and the local level, Shuaib Abu Kalam Saab, audio video team, Rabbi Saab, all the audience. So I will not take much time. I will make only one request. You heard every Khalifa came to the United States, they came to New York. Khalifa Rabi, even someone say, do you think if I came to the United States and don't visit the New York? This was his exact wording. I'm witness of that. So this is my humble request and deepest prayer that next time, and my deepest request to our respected Amir Saab, next time if Khalifa Khamas come visit United States, kindly add the New York City also, please. And I pray for everything. And Jazakallah once again. Thank you so much.
Jazakumullah Ahsanan Jazaa. After closing remarks, please raise your hands for silent prayer. Ameen. Allahumma ameen. Jazakumullah sanal jaza.